Yo, what's going on, guys? Called Game Sports here. Today we'll be doing my very last NBA mock draft, as today is the NBA draft. 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central. And let's get right into it. So, Detroit just came out with, they're going to go with Cade Cunningham, obviously. 6'8" frame, point guard. They said they're going to draft him no matter what. Then you have the Houston Rockets. You've been thinking, over the past weeks, do we go Evan Mobley or Jalen Green? You're going to have to do your homework. Well, I think they're going to go Jalen Green, find a trade for John Wall, and run Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green in the backcourt. So with Cleveland, I think this offseason they're actually going to trade Colin Sexton. So that means they'd have Darius Garland still there. And so this is where I'm going to get a little change of scenery here. I'm going to take Jalen Suggs out of Gonzaga. So with Toronto, if you don't want Evan Mobley and you're like, well, we could take Scotty Barnes if we just drop down a couple picks, or Jonathan Kuminga a couple picks. Yeah, well, you could. You could trade down to 7, and you could trade for 7 and James Wiseman, and that'd be a steal. But in this video, I'm not going to do any trades. So that's where I have it. I have them going Evan Mobley. Okay, there you go. Okay, so Scotty Barnes has actually been getting a lot of hype lately, and I think that he's going to live up to the hype. If he is going to be like Jonathan Isaac. Jonathan Isaac is a great defender. Scotty Barnes, great defender. If you want him to live up to it, you can live up to that. So I have him going Scotty Barnes. So now with the Thunder, you have loads of more picks coming up. And so you can think, well, can we take a long term, or are we going to take someone that can be well for us in the future? And they're going to be like, yeah, someone well in the future, and that's going to be Jonathan Kuminga, which they probably will trade Kemba soon. So Warriors, if you're going to try moving up, or if you're going to try acquiring more assets with the Toronto getting Pascal Siakam, trading 7 and 14, and James Wiseman and Andrew Wiggins, you can do that. But once again, I'm not trading, but there's been a lot of hype around James Bouknight here, and I love that fit now. I'm looking more at it, and I'm taking James Bouknight. So Orlando, the Chicago's pick, so they just got Scotty Barnes. Now you're like, oh, can we surround him with shooting? Well, you could, but you want to get that backup shooting guard, or that starting shooting guard if Gary Harris isn't starting. So you're like, oh, with Josh Giddey still at the board, you could take Josh Giddey to get shooting and can be that point guard. So now with the Kings situation, the Lakers are trying to get Buddy Hield. So you have Tyrese and De'Aaron, so you don't need point guards. You're pretty good there. You're probably going to trade Harrison Barnes. So you're like, well, I could take Franz Wagner to replace him, so I'm going to take Franz Wagner. So Memphis made a deal a couple days ago where they traded for the 10th pick, and they got Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe. So because they got Dylan Brooks and John Morant, and that's good. So now they need that shooting guard who's really good and can spread the floor, and I'm going to take Keon Johnson here. So Charlotte, you're probably not bringing back Devontae Graham, so you're like, well, I can use that backup PG, or mostly backup PG, because Terry Rozier's probably going to be at the 2. So you're like, oh, well, backup PG, I could take Davion Mitchell here with him still on the board, and that's kind of a steal. So San Antonio, with them still here, or with them here, you have a lot of veterans going into free agency. Then so you're probably going to turn into the rebuild this year. So you're like, I'm going to go young, and I'm going to go Jalen Johnson. So Pacers, you don't want to, because if you want to make the playoffs, you want some like veteran leadership, but you're probably going to draft that or trade for it. But with their lineup, like probably Malcolm Brogdon gone, so you're like, well, Moses Moody is a great player too. He can spread the floor and he can deliver the ball to Big Sabonis and Karis LeVert. So you're like, if you're going to trade Brogdon, which I think could happen this year, you take Moses Moody here. So Warriors, their last pick of the draft today, you're like, you already drafted James Bouknight. Well, you could get some defense and a good center in this draft. Or you could see that Usman Garuba, you could take him for the defense and for like, even though like your James Wiseman's probably going to be traded, he most likely will, and so you're like, oh, Usman Garuba could kind of replace him if we're going small ball, but Usman Garuba's a good pick. So Washington, you're probably going to go in the rebuild once you trade Russell and Bradley Beal. So you're going to go young, and if you want that replacement for Russell Westbrook, you go Sharif Cooper. So Thunder, they're thinking young, like they always do. So they're like, okay, Chris Duarte's still on the board. Okay, we're going to take him at number 16 for the shooting, the playmaking, and the spreading of the floor. So that's who you take. So now here comes New Orleans, who they just traded for Jonas Valanciunas. So then you're like, oh, who can we pair up with Zion? And if you want shooting around Zion to spread the floor and like a little bit of veteran leadership and coachable, you go Kerry Kispert with how high he is in the draft. So now, again, the Thunder, you want to create more spacing, but you also want to get a facilitator next to Shea if he's playing shooting guard. So you're like, oh, point guards, there's Jared Butler. But we think we don't want to take a reach for Jared Butler. We think if we could trade down a little bit, we could take him, but we don't want to. So we are going to take Isaiah Jackson for that center position. So Knicks, they have a pick and 2. I think they'd be really happy with this, getting Trey Murphy right here. Shooting guard, can spread the floor and that stuff. So then here comes Atlanta. So you're like, well, Trae Young was great this season, and you could use a little bit more for him, like a defensive minded next to him. So like with Jared Butler on the board, you're like, let's put him in shooting guard so we can move Bogdan to the 3, and then we move so you're probably going to re-sign these two. Then John Collins at the 4, Trae at the 1. You have DeAndre Hunter, Onyeka, and Kevin Huerter coming off the bench. And then Clint Capella at the starting center. And you're good. Like, that's great. So next year you go again. So they just drafted Trey Murphy. So now they're going to be like, is Julius Randle that guy? He has 1 year left on his deal. Are we going to re-sign him? Well, with Derrick Rose getting up there in age, and you're like, well, should we trade for him? Or should we sign and trade him? And they're like, if you want to get more depth in the point guard position, you go trade Man. So LeBron, I think he'd be really happy with this pick. He has Cam Thompson still on the board, so you go Cam Thompson for this shooting. So here's Rockets with back-to-back picks and their last picks. So they're going to be like, well, if we're not going to get, if we're going to pick Jalen Green, we need like a good center going next to Christian Wood. And Alperen Sengun is that guy. He's really good. And then Houston again, you're like, well, we just got that center, so we're gonna be like, oh, we could use some shooting or some more backcourt depth in the small forward. And so, but there's not a lot here. So you're like, oh, who can be a power forward slash small forward? There's not also a lot here. So it could be the shooting guard slash small forward. Oh, there's Joshua Primo. He's really good. Take him for the shooting and for the depth. So the Clippers, we have them going into the top 5 now. And so 5 left picks. So Kawhi's probably going to get out of his deal, and so they're like, well, if we want to replace Kawhi, we probably need to take a reach here, but we're gonna go Zaire Williamson and have like PG try to mentor him or something like that. So Denver, you have Jokic, you have Murray, and you have Michael Porter Jr. You have a small piece. Now you need to be like, well, how do we complete like the rebuild and start getting into the finals more? You're going to be like, oh, well, you need that shooting guard that can do everything. So like shooting guards, you have Quentin Grimes still on the board. That's a great pick right there. And yeah, so with the 27th pick, Brooklyn needs bad defense and big men, so they're going to go Kai Jones. And then Philly, with Miles McBride, still there for the shooting, and with what Ben Simmons might go through, he could be a good backup for Tyrese Maxey if he's still there. So with Chris Paul and Cameron Payne being free agents, you're thinking like, oh, well, because Chris Paul's probably going to opt out of his deal, then you're like, oh, shit, if we can re-sign Cameron Payne, and then we could get James Springer here, that would be great. So Utah with the last pick, they have Mike Conley. They're probably going to sign him back for like 20, 25 mil, and then you're like, okay, well, we're at a lot of cap right now. We need shooting, but we also need forwards, but with I'm still going to keep it like this, but you're going to go freshman Josh Christopher. That's going to be it for me today, guys. Hope you guys enjoy. Please like and subscribe. We have 13 more subscribers, as you can see right here, till we reach 100 subscribers. And peace out, my friends.